Adrian was cheating on me. But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find his mistress. In the steam-filled bathroom, severely depressed, I lay in the bathtub, letting the blood from my wrists drip into the water, watching my life slip away. It was my sister, Natalie, who kicked the door open and saved me. It was Natalie who later drove her car straight into Adrian, leaving him half dead, forcing him to get on his knees in front of my hospital bed to beg for my forgiveness. From that day on, Adrian changed. He stopped staying out late at elite clubs. He came straight home from work every single day. Even if he ran into other women on the street, he would literally step 30 feet away to keep his distance. I thought our marriage had finally reached a turning point, until today, when I received a FaceTime call from myself, 10 years in the future. Looking at the pale, sickly me on the screen, I frowned and asked, "But he stopped cheating, didn't he?" The future me didn't say a word. She just flipped the camera. On the screen, Adrian was gently caressing Natalie's swollen, pregnant belly. His eyes were filled with an agonizing, suppressed pain. "It's been 10 years, Natalie. Please don't abort this baby again, okay? How much longer are you going to punish me?" Natalie was sobbing, tears streaming down her face. "We betrayed Chloe. This baby, we don't deserve to keep it." I froze, my blood turning to ice. The mistress I could never find, the woman my husband was sleeping with, was my beloved sister. Adrian had hidden her so well. He hid her so well that she was pregnant, and I hadn't suspected a thing. The camera flipped back to my future self. 10 years later, I stared at myself with a wild, crazed laugh. Do you hear them? Adrian never loved you. Just pull the trigger. End it now. Set them free. I lowered my eyes and slowly picked up the pistol from the desk. I pressed the cold metal barrel against my temple. Adrian is a total germaphobe, Chloe. Why do you think he suddenly volunteers to take out the trash every single day? Did you really think Natalie was staying with us just to help watch him? Don't be stupid. Go look at the blind spot behind the garage. Those 10 minutes when he takes out the trash is the only time they get to escape your suffocating presence. They use that time to make out like animals. The front door clicked open. Adrian was home. Seeing the gun pressed against my temple, his face instantly went dead white. "Chloe, what the hell are you doing?" He didn't even take off his shoes. He lunged forward like a madman. The voice on the phone kept screaming. "Look at his wrist. You know how severe his OCD is. Look at him right now." Adrian had severe germophobia and OCD. His shirt cuffs were always folded back exactly 3 times, perfectly neat, exposing his wrists. But right now, his cuffs were messy and unbuttoned. There was even a faint smudge of red lipstick on the edge of the fabric. My gaze drifted past him, landing on Natalie. Her makeup was slightly smeared. Clink. My hands lost all strength. The gun slipped, almost grazing my ear as it hit the table. Adrian stopped dead in his tracks, his hands raised in the air, speaking in a trembling, soothing voice. "Chloe, put the gun down. Please. Don't hurt yourself." I stared at his messy cuffs, my voice shaking uncontrollably. "Who is she?" Adrian froze. He quickly unlocked his phone, opened his Snapchat location history, and thrust it in front of me. I just went down to empty the trash bin. It was right outside. It took less than 10 minutes. A deep, exhausting weariness washed over his eyes. "Chloe, that incident happened 3 years ago. How much longer are you going to keep dragging me through this hell? I am so tired from taking care of you every single day. Please stop being so paranoid." As he spoke, he stepped forward, trying to grab the gun. I waved the pistol wildly, stepping back. "Don't touch me." The gun knocked against the edge of the desk. In my panic, my finger pulled the trigger. A loud bang echoed through the room. The bullet grazed my palm, and bright red blood spurted out, dripping heavily onto the hardwood floor. "Chloe!" Natalie screamed and rushed forward to stop me. But she ran too fast, twisting her ankle and crashing hard against the side cabinet. "Natalie!" Adrian lunged forward almost instinctively to catch her. But just as his hands were about to touch her waist, he seemed to realize something. He froze in midair, forcing his hands back. Natalie looked at my bleeding hand, turned around, and slapped Adrian across the face. "You bastard! You pushed her again. You know she is sick." The slap was incredibly loud. Adrian's head snapped to the side. He clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white, fighting to control his exploding emotions. When he turned back to look at me, all the frustration and disgust in his eyes had vanished. He was back to being the submissive, gentle husband again. "I'm sorry. I lost my temper. Chloe, you're bleeding. Let me bandage it." Adrian knelt in front of me, but his eyes were glued to Natalie's swollen ankle. After quickly wrapping my hand, he naturally handed the first aid kit to Natalie. His voice was incredibly hoarse. Put some ice on that ankle.
Now.
Watching his pathetic, secretive tenderness toward her, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and locked myself in the bedroom. 3 years ago, when I first caught Adrian cheating, I had searched every hotel room like a lunatic, but I couldn't find a single strand of that woman's hair. In utter despair, I locked myself in the bathroom and slit my wrists. It was Natalie who drove her car into him, dragging his bloodied body to my bedside to confess. That day, the proud Adrian had knelt before me, crying like a child who had lost his entire world. "Chloe, I beg you. You can't die. I love you." That heartbreaking display made me believe he actually loved me. But now, a phone call from the future had shattered every beautiful lie I lived in. This wasn't just a corporate office. It was a perfect, one-to-one replica of our master bedroom. The dark green velvet sofa, the floor lamp in the corner that Adrian had personally picked out. Even the fresh lilies on the coffee table were identical to the ones we had at home. But there was one major difference. The wall where our wedding photo should have hung was covered in hundreds of photos of Natalie. Natalie cooking in the kitchen. Natalie sleeping on the sofa. Every photo was shot with breathtaking lighting and warmth. Even through the paper, I could feel an overwhelming, suffocating love. My heart shattered into a million pieces. I remembered our honeymoon. I had spent 2 hours on my makeup, happily begging Adrian to take a photo of me. He had just clicked the shutter twice, completely distracted, leaving me with 2 blurry, ugly pictures. It turned out he didn't hate taking photos. He just saved all of his patience and love for Natalie. Footsteps echoed outside the door. I snapped out of my daze and hid inside the walk-in closet. The door pushed open. "Let go of me." Natalie choked back a sob, trying to shake off Adrian's grip. But Adrian held her tightly, pressing her against his chest like a madman. "Natalie, I can't do this anymore." When she held that gun today, all I could think was, if she just pulled the trigger, would we finally be free? Natalie slapped him hard. "You monster. She is your wife. But I don't love her." Adrian's eyes were bloodshot, his voice dripping with despair. "You have no idea how much I suffocate sleeping next to her every night. Natalie, let me just tell her the truth. If she agrees to a divorce, I will give her every single penny I own." Natalie broke down crying.
No.
"If you tell her now, you will kill her." Adrian buried his face in her neck, clinging to her like a drowning man. "What about me? You worry about her, but who is going to save me?" Natalie wept as if her heart was breaking. "When we were 10, she pushed me out of the way of that speeding truck. I swore I would protect her with my life. But I fell in love with her husband. And when you pissed off those thugs for your business deal, she was the one who got cornered in the parking lot for you. If it weren't for us, Chloe wouldn't be sick. How can we do this to her?" Adrian trembled, kissing her tears away. Inside the dark closet, my nails dug deep into the wound on my palm. The blood started flowing again, but I couldn't feel any pain. So that was the truth. How beautiful. How romantic. One betrayed her own heart to repay a life-saving debt. The other carried a heavy cross out of guilt. In their grand, epic, tragic love story, what the hell was I? After what felt like an eternity, the room fell silent. I crawled out of the closet and walked out of the office building, stumbling like a ghost. The freezing winter wind slashed my face, drying my tears. I suddenly remembered the day Adrian had thrown the divorce papers at me, screaming that he wanted out even if it meant losing everything. But then he suddenly stopped mentioning it. He wasn't staying for me. He was terrified that my death would stain his hands and that Natalie would never be able to live with the guilt. Since they were in so much pain, I decided to set them free. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer's number. "Marcus, please draft a divorce agreement for me. As fast as possible." The line went dead silent for a long time. "Chloe, is this a joke?" Marcus's voice was filled with confusion and pity. "There is no marriage record for you and Adrian in the county system. Chloe, in the eyes of the law, you are still single." I stood on the freezing street, my mind going completely blank. So, Adrian gave me a diamond ring, a lavish wedding, and took care of me daily. But he kept his legal status absolutely clean and single for Natalie. Even when he was acting out this marriage with me, he was saving his legal wife's spot for her. I laughed. I laughed until my face was soaked with tears. Yet, holding on to the very last shred of hope, I redialed the number from 10 years later. "I want to know, did he ever love me? Even for a second?" The line was quiet for a long while. "Go to the VIP wing of the hospital right now. You'll see how pathetic your question is." I walked to the hospital, like a hollow shell. Through the glass window of the private room, I saw Natalie throwing up into a basin, likely from a stomach bug. And Adrian. The man who couldn't stand a speck of dust, the extreme germaphobe, was gently wiping the vomit from the corner of her mouth with his bare hand. My tears fell silently. 6 months ago, when I threw up in the middle of the night due to my antidepressant side effects, what did he do? He recoiled as if he had been shocked, frowning as he called the maid to clean it up. Then he locked himself in the bathroom and took 3 showers. He didn't look at me once as I lay gasping on the floor. But with Natalie, his germophobia completely disappeared. Adrian came out carrying the basin. Seeing me, he immediately shut the door behind him. Seeing my bare feet and blue lips, his defensive stance relaxed. He took off his coat and wrapped it around me. Are you insane? Running out like this in the middle of the night? Do you want to die? Even now, he was still playing the dutiful protector. I stared at him, my voice eerily calm. She's in there, right? Adrian's face darkened, his grip on my shoulder tightening. That's an important client. You're having an episode. I'm taking you home. I shoved him hard and slammed the door open. Chloe, Adrian roared. The person on the bed gasped, quickly pulling the blanket over her head. I reached for the edge of the blanket. I could have ripped their lies apart right then and there, but my hand froze. Even at this point, I wanted to hear them admit it. Under Adrian's terrified gaze, I pulled a small pocket knife from my coat. I pointed it directly at my chest. Adrian, pull that blanket off. Tell me who she is. Or I will die right here, tonight. Your choice. Adrian didn't move. The patience in his eyes slowly turned into pure disgust. Chloe, do you think threatening me with your life still works? For 3 years, every time something doesn't go your way, you play the suicide card. Don't you get tired of playing the girl who cried wolf? The girl who cried wolf. So, every time I had reached out to him while drowning in depression, it was just a cheap performance in his eyes. The final spark of hope in my heart died. I gave a soft laugh and plunged the knife toward my chest. Adrian's face deformed in horror. Don't you dare touch her. Without even looking at where my knife was aimed, he lunged forward and kicked me squarely in the stomach. I flew backward, crashing violently onto the hard floor. A sharp, tearing pain exploded in my lower abdomen. But I didn't cry. I just watched him wrap his arms around the woman on the bed, shielding her with his body, staring at me like I was a rabid animal. He thought I was going to hurt her. So, he didn't hesitate to break me. In that moment, I was truly, completely exhausted. Adrian, the game is over. Let's end this. Adrian's shock lasted only 3 seconds before he sneered. Stop testing me. If you really wanted to leave, you would have done it years ago. This time, I mean it. Crash. The person on the bed, trembling violently, fell off the mattress and landed straight into the shattered glass of a dropped water cup. A muffled cry of pain came from under the blanket. Adrian panicked. He scooped her up in his arms, rushing toward the door without a single backward glance at me. Don't worry, honey. I've got you. Let's find a doctor. I lay on the freezing tile floor, watching a dark, terrifying pool of blood spread from beneath my legs. Before I even knew I was pregnant, I had a miscarriage. Adrian sat by my bedside, his face filled with guilt. Chloe, it just wasn't the right time. Once you get better, we can try again. I stared at him blankly, catching the subtle sigh of relief in his eyes. This was the second child we had lost. 3 years ago, during my first pregnancy, Natalie had moved in to help take care of me. That was when she and Adrian started. After that, Adrian stopped coming home. On the night Natalie also didn't return, I slipped in the bathroom and suffered a massive hemorrhage, losing the baby. It was after that night that I found his cheating evidence and tried to slit my wrists. How pathetic. My 2 unborn children were nothing but collateral damage in their grand romance. Adrian clearly recalled that night too. He couldn't look me in the eye. He mumbled something about paying the hospital bill and fled the room. My phone screen lit up. Do you really think you miscarried because of his kick? The pills he's been giving you for years, they weren't just antidepressants. They were laced with birth control. Even if you got pregnant by accident, you could never carry a baby to term. Chloe, let go. The longer you stay alive to block them, the stronger their love grows. Only your death can pin them to the pillar of shame forever. I silently hung up the phone. No screaming. No crying. After being discharged, I was unnaturally quiet. I stopped checking his phone. I stopped asking questions. But the quieter I became, the more terrified they grew. Finally, Adrian couldn't take the tension anymore. There's an emergency at the office. I need to go out of town for a week. He watched me closely, bracing himself for an explosive meltdown. But I just nodded calmly. Okay. Then I looked at Natalie. You must be tired of looking after me, Natalie. Take this week off too. I can manage. Both of them froze. They hadn't expected me to agree so easily. The excuses they had prepared died in their throats. Adrian tried to probe. Chloe, that day at the hospital, did you see something? I looked at him. See what? Seeing my blank face, he let out a huge sigh of relief. His eyes softened. When I get back, I'll take you to Switzerland to see the Alps, okay? Switzerland. For 3 years, I had begged him to take me. He had always refused, saying it was too far, that I was too sick, and that I would only be a burden. And I had waited for 3 years. I whispered, okay. That night, the guest room door wasn't fully closed. Natalie's soft crying floated down the hallway. Adrian, are we being too cruel to Chloe? She just had a miscarriage. Adrian's voice was cold and absolute. I'm doing this to save all of us. If she stays here, she will eventually drive us both insane. Sending her to a private sanatorium in Switzerland is the best choice for everyone. So that was his plan. It was never about fulfilling my dream. It wasn't an apology. They wanted to dump me in the freezing snow of a foreign country forever, clearing the path for their beautiful love. I smiled silently. Why go through all that trouble? I walked back to my room, turned on the faucet, and filled the bathtub to the brim. As the blade sliced through my vein, the blood bloomed in the water like beautiful silk ribbons. For the first time in 3 years, I felt entirely free. The water was warm, a heavy blanket of crimson silk wrapping around my shivering limbs. As my vision blurred, the steam rising from the bathtub began to look like dancing shadows, whispering that the pain was finally over. I welcomed the silence. I welcomed the coldness creeping into my fingertips. But the universe, in its cruel, relentless irony, refused to let me go. A violent crash shattered the quiet of the house. Through the heavy fog of my fading consciousness, I heard the splintering of wood, followed by frantic, heavy footsteps. Rough, desperate hands plunged into the water, pulling my limp body upward. I expected to hear Adrian's slick, practiced panic or Natalie's high-pitched, guilt-ridden tears. Instead, a voice I hadn't expected screamed my name. Chloe, stay with me. Damn it, Chloe, look at me. It was Marcus, my father's trusted lawyer, the man who had drafted the estate papers years ago, and the only person who had looked at me with genuine pity when I called him on the street. He had recognized the chilling finality in my voice during our brief, bizarre phone call. He knew something was terribly wrong. He hadn't just sat by his phone. He had raced to my house, breaking down the front door just as the last of my life was draining into the porcelain tub. When I finally opened my eyes, the world was a sterile white. The sharp, acrid smell of antiseptic burned my nostrils. Every breath felt like inhaling shattered glass, and my wrists throbbed with a dull, white-hot agony, bound tightly in heavy white gauze. Beside my bed sat Marcus, his tailored suit wrinkled, his tie loosened and dark circles carving deep hollows beneath his eyes. When he saw me move, a shuddering breath escaped his lips. You're alive, he whispered, his voice cracking. Don't try to move, Chloe. You're safe. I stared at the ceiling, my voice barely a rasp.
Why?
Why did you save me? Before he could answer, the door clicked open. A grim-faced doctor in a white coat walked in holding a clipboard. He looked at Marcus, then at me, his expression carrying a heavy weight of professional concern. Miss Chloe, the doctor said, deliberately avoiding the name Mrs. Vance that Adrian always insisted on. We ran a comprehensive toxicology and blood panel. When you were admitted, we managed to flush your system, but we found something deeply alarming. I turned my head slowly, the cold vinyl of the hospital pillow sticking to my
cheek.
Your blood contained toxic levels of synthetic hormones, specifically high-potency estrogen and progestin, along with microdoses of a severe central nervous system depressant, the doctor explained, pointing to the chart. These aren't standard ingredients in any antidepressant. Taken over a long period, they cause severe emotional instability, cognitive decline, memory gaps, and physical resistance to full-term pregnancies. If you had stayed on them much longer, the damage to your nervous system would have been irreversible. The realization hit me like a physical blow, knocking the remaining breath from my lungs. The antidepressants. Every single morning, Adrian would personally bring me my medication with a glass of warm water, kissing my forehead and whispering how much he wanted me to
get better.
He wasn't trying to heal my mind. He was actively poisoning me. He was keeping me weak, compliant, perpetually paranoid, and chemically sterile, ensuring I could never carry a baby to term, all while convincing the world, and me, that I was simply a madwoman drowning in her own delusions. And the phone call? I whispered, my mind racing. The FaceTime call from myself, 10 years in the future. Marcus gently placed my phone on the bedside table. Chloe, we checked your call logs and network history. There was no incoming call. The doctor believes the toxic cocktail in your system, combined with extreme psychological trauma, induced a state of chemical psychosis. Your mind suffered a severe sensory hallucination. I stared at the black screen of my phone. It hadn't been a time travel miracle. It wasn't a supernatural warning from a future self. It was my own brain, fighting through the chemical fog Adrian had trapped me in, using the only mechanism it had left, a fever dream, to piece together the clues. My conscious mind was too terrified to accept. My subconscious had observed the messy cuffed wrists, the lipstick, the secret apartment, and the fake marriage, and had forced me to see the truth before it was too late. My soul had literally hallucinated a savior because no one else was coming to save me. I closed my eyes, a single, cold tear slipping down my temple. The naive, fragile girl who had slit her wrists in the bathtub was dead. The girl who desperately wanted Adrian's love had drowned in that red water. In her place, a cold, calculating clarity took root. I looked at Marcus, my eyes devoid of the tears that had defined my existence for the last 3 years. Marcus, I said, my voice steady and quiet. They think I'm weak. They think I'm a broken doll they can discard in a Swiss sanatorium. Let them keep thinking that. Marcus looked at me, a slow, dark understanding dawning in his eyes. He leaned forward. What do you want to do, Chloe? I want to play the part, I whispered. I want to give them the perfect ending to their tragic love story, and then I want to burn it to the ground. When Adrian and Natalie arrived at the hospital, they were a picture of manicured grief. They had cut their out-of-town trip short, rushing to my bedside with breathless apologies. Adrian flung himself over my bed, weeping tears that might have moved me a week ago. Chloe. Oh my God, Chloe. Why would you do this again? He cried, his hands trembling as he reached out to touch my face. I flinched, pulling away, staring at the far wall with wide, unblinking eyes. I didn't say a word. I let my limbs hang limp, mimicking the empty, catatonic state of a patient who had completely lost her grip on reality. Natalie stood in the corner of the room, her hands wringing her coat, her eyes red and swollen. She couldn't look at me. The guilt was a physical weight on her shoulders, bowing her head. The doctors say she experienced a severe psychotic break, Adrian whispered to Natalie, his voice carrying a subtle, sickening undercurrent of relief. The trauma of the miscarriage. It was too much for her. Is she ever going to wake up? Natalie asked, her voice trembling. She's gone, Natalie, Adrian murmured, wrapping a comforting arm around her waist, his fingers pressing into her hip in a brief, stolen caress right in front of my hospital bed. But we will take care of her. I've already contacted the private clinic in Switzerland. It's quiet there. She will have the best care. It's the only way we can keep her safe from herself. I kept my gaze fixed on the sterile white wall, maintaining my frozen expression. Inside, my heart was a block of dry ice, burning with a silent, freezing rage. They wanted me gone, tucked away in a foreign country where my voice would be dismissed as the ramblings of a lunatic, leaving them free to live their perfect, stolen life with my family's fortune. 2 days later, I was discharged into Adrian's care. I played the mute, fragile victim perfectly. I let them will me into the house, let them feed me spoonfuls of soup, and let them guide me to my bed like an invalid. But the moment the house fell silent at night, the ghost woke up. While Adrian and Natalie slept in their separate rooms, maintaining their agonizing, guilt-ridden distance under our roof, I slipped out of bed. The chemical poison was slowly leaving my system, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. With Marcus's help, I began the quiet, systematic dismantling of Adrian Vance. Marcus worked tirelessly in the shadows, digging into the financial records of my father's estate. My father, a wealthy real estate developer, had left his entire fortune in a trust for me, with Adrian named as the co-trustee, due to my fragile health. Chloe, it's worse than we thought, Marcus told me over an encrypted burner phone late one night. Adrian has been systematically funneling money out of your trust into a series of offshore shell companies. He's embezzled over $4 million over the past 3 years. And there's more. The penthouse, I whispered. The dark green velvet sofa. Yes, Marcus confirmed. One of those shell companies owns a luxury penthouse downtown. It was purchased 2 years ago. I managed to get the access codes from the building's management under the guise of an estate audit. The next afternoon, while Adrian was supposedly at an urgent board meeting and Natalie was out buying supplies for my journey to Switzerland, Marcus picked me up in a nondescript car. We drove to the downtown high-rise. My heart hammered against my ribs as we rode the elevator to the top floor. When the door slid open, I walked down the carpeted hallway and stood before the dark mahogany door. Marcus punched in the code. The lock clicked open. I stepped inside and for a moment, breath failed me. It was exactly as my hallucination had foretold. The dark green velvet sofa sat in the center of the sunlit living room. In the corner stood the brass floor lamp Adrian had supposedly spent weeks sourcing for our master bedroom. On the coffee table lay a vase of fresh, white lilies, identical to the ones that always sat on our dining table at home. I walked slowly into the master bedroom. The wall where a wedding photo should have been was covered in hundreds of framed photographs. Natalie laughing in a sunlit kitchen. Natalie sleeping peacefully under a silk sheet. Natalie reading by a window. Every photo was captured with breathtaking lighting, an intimate, agonizingly beautiful showcase of a woman adored. Adrian didn't hate taking photos. He just saved all of his passion, all of his patience, for the sister he legally couldn't have. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the physical manifestation of my sister's betrayal. I didn't cry. The tears had been burned out of me in the bathtub. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took high-resolution photos of every single corner of the apartment, every financial document hidden in Adrian's desk, and every photograph on the wall. "Chloe," Marcus said from the doorway, his face pale as he looked at the wall of photos. "There's something else. We did a background check on the incident from 3 years ago. The thugs who cornered you in the parking lot." I turned around, my brow furrowing. The men who traumatized me? The ones who started my depression? "They weren't random thugs, Chloe," Marcus said, handing me a manila folder. "The leader of that group was a man named Thomas Vance, Adrian's estranged cousin, a low-level enforcer for an illegal gambling ring. Adrian had run up a massive debt. He couldn't pay it, and his creditors were threatening to expose him to your father's business associates, which would have ruined him." I opened the folder, my eyes scanning the police reports and the modern-day transcripts of Marcus's private investigator. "Adrian didn't get cornered," Marcus explained quietly. "He set you up. He knew you would be in that parking lot. He told his cousin to scare you to make it look like a violent debt collection attempt, so Adrian could step in, play the savior, and use the trauma to justify pulling millions of dollars out of your father's estate to pay off his debts under the guise of your medical expenses and security. And he used that exact incident to convince Natalie that she was the one who caused it because she had introduced him to those business contacts." The sheer, sickening depth of his sociopathy laid bare before me. Adrian hadn't just cheated on me. He had orchestrated the very trauma that broke my mind. He had manufactured my illness, poisoned my body, stolen my inheritance, and gaslit my sister into a life of agonizing guilt, all to keep us both trapped in his twisted, profitable little web. "He's a monster," I whispered, my voice trembling with a dark, terrifying amusement. "A beautiful, perfect monster. The police can arrest him for financial fraud, Chloe," Marcus said. "We have enough to put him away for embezzlement." "No," I said, closing the folder with a sharp snap. "Embezzlement is too clean. A trial would let him hire expensive lawyers, play the victim, and drag my name through the mud. I want him to lose everything. His freedom, his reputation, his sanity, and the only woman he ever loved." I looked back at the wall of photos of Natalie. "They built their tragic love story on my blood," I said. "It's only fitting that we use their guilt to tear it down." The day of our departure to Switzerland was cold and overcast. A heavy, gray fog hung over the city, mirroring the bleakness in Adrian and Natalie's eyes as they packed my bags. I sat in my wheelchair, staring blankly out the window, a wool blanket draped over my knees. "The air in the Swiss Alps is incredibly pure, Chloe," Adrian murmured, kneeling beside me and gently rubbing my hands. "The doctors at the clinic are world-renowned. They will help you find your peace." I didn't answer. I just gave a slow, empty nod. Natalie stood near the door, her face pale, her lips pressed into a tight line. She looked like she was marching to her own execution. She had agreed to accompany us to settle me in, but the sheer weight of what they were locking me away forever so they could finally be free, was eating her alive. The flight on the private charter was silent. Adrian sat next to me, occasionally stroked my hair, playing the role of the devoted, tragic husband for the flight crew. But every time his fingers touched my scalp, I felt a violent urge to rip his throat out. I forced my body to remain perfectly still, my eyes fixed on the clouds outside the window. We arrived at the Valet Sanatorium late in the afternoon. It was a stunning, isolated estate nestled deep in the snow-capped peaks of the Swiss Alps. The air was freezing, biting at my cheeks as they wheeled me through the grand, sterile halls of the clinic. The facility was luxurious, but make no mistake, it was a prison. The windows were reinforced glass, the doors required keycards, and the staff walked with the quiet, practiced authority of wardens. Adrian had booked a private suite for us for the first 3 days, under the pretense of easing my transition. That evening, the snow began to fall heavily, blanketing the pine trees in a thick, silent white. "I'll go speak to the chief medical officer about your intake forms," Adrian said, kissing my temple. "Natalie, stay with her, please." Once the door clicked shut, the silence in the suite became deafening. Natalie sat on the edge of the dark green sofa in the living room, her face buried in her hands. She began to sob, soft, shuddering gasps that shook her entire frame. "I'm sorry, Chloe," she whispered to the empty room, believing I couldn't hear or understand her. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. If I could take it all back, if I could have died in that parking lot instead of you." I stood up from my wheelchair. The sound of my footsteps on the hardwood floor was quiet, but to Natalie it must have sounded like a thunderclap. She gasped, her head snapping up, her eyes widening in sheer terror as she saw me standing, walking toward her with a straight back and a cold, clear gaze. "Chloe," she whispered, scrambling backward on the sofa. You're walking? You're talking?" "I've been walking for weeks, Natalie," I said, my voice smooth, calm, and utterly devoid of the trembling weakness she was used to. "And my mind has never been clearer." She stared at me, her chest heaving. "But the doctors, Adrian said you had a psychotic break," he said. The medication Adrian was feeding me was laced with illegal hormone suppressants and central nervous system depressants, I said, tossing a small, transparent bag onto the coffee table. Inside were the blue pills I had saved from my daily doses. "He was poisoning me, Natalie. He killed my babies. He made me look crazy so he could steal my father's estate and lock me in the snowy tomb." Natalie's face drained of all color. She shook her head violently. No, Adrian wouldn't do that. He loves you." He felt so guilty. "He loves my money," I corrected her, leaning down until my face was inches from hers. "And he loves you. But do you want to know the most beautiful part of your tragic, epic love story, Natalie?" I pulled a tablet from my bag and pressed play, laying it on the table between us. It was the video confession of Thomas Vance, Adrian's cousin. On the screen, the bruised, desperate man detailed exactly how Adrian had paid him to stage the parking lot attack 3 years ago. He explained how Adrian had orchestrated the entire event to traumatize me, using my subsequent mental breakdown to access the trust funds and pay off his massive gambling debts. "He told me to make sure your sister, Natalie, felt responsible." Thomas's voice echoed through the quiet room. "He wanted her to think she brought the danger to the family. That way, she'd do whatever he wanted out of guilt." Natalie watched the video, her eyes frozen, her breath hitching in her throat. Every word was a knife carving away the illusion of the man she had sacrificed her soul for. "He didn't love you, Natalie," I whispered, my voice dripping with cold pity. "He weaponized your love for me. He turned your childhood debt, the speeding truck I saved you from, into a shackle. He made you believe you destroyed my life so you would let him drag you into his bed. He used your guilt to keep you silent, and he used my illness to keep his pockets full." "No." Natalie choked out, a raw, agonizing sob tearing from her throat. She fell to her knees, clutching her head. No. He told me we were protecting you. He said we had to stay together to keep you alive." "He lied," I said. "About everything. There was never a marriage certificate between us. He kept himself legally single, so he could eventually marry you once I died or was declared incompetent, ensuring my father's fortune stayed in his hands forever." The door to the suite swung open. Adrian walked in, a bright, cheerful smile on his face. Chloe, darling, I've spoken to the doctor. He stopped dead in his tracks.
He saw me standing.
He saw the tablet playing the video on the coffee table.
He
Saw Natalie on her knees, sobbing hysterically, her face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. What? What is going on here? Adrian asked, his voice faltering, his hand tightening on the doorknob. The game is over, Adrian, I said, taking a step toward him. Adrian's face underwent a terrifying transformation. The gentle, submissive husband vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating predator. He quickly shut the door behind him and locked it, his eyes darting around the room, assessing the
threat.
Chloe, he said, his voice dropping its warm register, becoming flat and dangerous. You think you've played a clever little game, but you're in Switzerland. You're in a private clinic where the staff answers to me. Who do you think they will believe? A certified lunatic who just tried to slit her wrists, or the devoted husband who pays their bills? They won't have to choose. A voice said from the shadows of the suite's kitchenette. Marcus stepped out, holding a folder of documents and a recording device. Behind him, the balcony door slid open, and 2 officers from the Swiss Federal Police stepped into the room, their expressions grim and uncompromising. Adrian stepped back, his face turning pale. What is this? This is private property, Mr. Vance, one of the Swiss officers said in fluent, heavily accented English. You are under arrest for the illegal importation and administration of toxic substances, financial fraud, and corporate embezzlement. We have a federal warrant signed by the Zurich prosecutor, backed by forensic blood analysis and financial records provided by the Interpol office in your home country. Adrian looked at the officers, then at Marcus, and finally at me. His perfect, germophobic composure was entirely shattered. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple, and he began to breathe heavily, his hands trembling. Chloe, please, Adrian stammered, trying to step toward me, his voice cracking with a desperate attempt at his old manipulation. You don't understand. I did it for us. The money, we needed it to survive. You bastard. A primal, screeching cry tore from Natalie. She lunged from the floor, grabbing the heavy crystal wine decanter from the dining table. Before anyone could stop her, she swung it with all her might, smashing it directly into Adrian's face. The glass shattered with a deafening crack. Dark red wine and bright crimson blood splattered across the pristine white walls and the light-colored carpet. Adrian held in agony, falling to his knees, clutching his face as blood poured through his fingers. His severe OCD, his absolute terror of filth and bodily fluids, made the experience a living hell. He screamed, thrashing on the floor, trying to wipe the blood and wine from his hands, only to smear it further across his face and clothes. Get it off me! Get it off! He shrieked, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, pathetic wail. The Swiss officers quickly stepped in, pinning him to the floor. They slapped heavy steel handcuffs onto his bloody wrists, completely ignoring his muffled screams of disgust as his face was pressed into the wet, stained carpet. Natalie collapsed onto the sofa, her hands shaking, her face covered in Adrian's
blood.
She looked at me, her eyes hollow, pleading for a forgiveness she knew she didn't deserve. Chloe, she whispered, her voice cracking. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know he did those things to you. I looked down at her. I felt no anger. I felt no satisfaction. I felt only a profound, echoing emptiness. I know you didn't know about the poisoning, Natalie, I said quietly, my voice carrying the weight of a final farewell. But you still chose to sleep with my husband. You still chose to build your happiness on my despair. You chose to believe his lies because it was easier than facing your own betrayal. Chloe, please, she sobbed, reaching her bloody hand toward me. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. The trust fund is secured, Natalie, I said, looking at her one last time. Adrian will spend the rest of his life in a Swiss prison, and then a federal penitentiary back home. But as for you, you will have to live with the knowledge of what you did. You will have to live in the prison of your own mind, knowing that the epic love you sacrificed your sister for was nothing but a cheap, dirty scam. I turned my back on her and walked toward the door. Chloe, she screamed behind me, her voice echoing off the sterile walls of the
clinic.
Don't leave me, please. I didn't look back. I walked out of the sanatorium and stood on the wide, stone terrace overlooking the Swiss Alps. The freezing winter wind whipped past my face, biting my skin, But for the first time in 3 years, it didn't feel like a punishment. It felt clean. It felt like a baptism. Below me, the blue and red lights of the police cruisers painted the pristine white snow in flashing hues. I watched as they dragged Adrian out, his head covered in a jacket, his body shivering in the cold. Natalie followed shortly after, escorted by a female officer, her head bowed, her spirit entirely broken. Marcus walked out onto the terrace, wrapping a thick, warm coat around my shoulders. "It's over, Chloe," he said quietly. "The Swiss authorities are coordinating with the State Department. Adrian won't see the light of day for a very long
time.
And your father's estate is entirely back in your control." "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my voice barely a whisper in the wind.
For
believing me, for saving me. "I did it for your father and for you," Marcus said, giving my shoulder a gentle, protective squeeze. "What will you do now?" I looked out at the vast, white expanse of the mountains. The future Chloe, on that hallucinated FaceTime screen, had been right about one thing. The cycle of abuse and trauma had to end.
But she was wrong about how to
End it. I didn't need to pull the trigger. I didn't need to let my blood drip into a cold bathtub to escape them. I just needed to wake up. I pulled the warm coat tighter around myself, breathing in the crisp, icy mountain air. For the first time in my life, the air felt completely pure. I was alive, I was free, and the future was finally mine to write.